Hey there, welcome. It's me, Celia. This is the first video I've done in a while on this channel. I think my last video was 2022 and it's now 2026, so yeah, there's a lot to talk about. This video I want to do a little bit of an update on my Lyme story, what kind of happened when I left off of my story up until now. So that's kind of a lot to cover, but I'm going to put it in a nutshell. Just a summary. I feel like before I can make new videos or new information about Lyme disease and the co-infections and other stuff, I, at least for my own sake, kind of need to do a tiny bit of a resolution as to what this Lyme story of mine is. Now, there's no way I can cover it all, and it would just be too much. I really would have to kind of break things down into smaller videos, and you know, someday maybe I'll do that. So yeah, let's get into it. But before I get started with that, my name is Celia Lindeman. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and clinical herbalist, and I do work with a specialty in Lyme disease, as a bunch of other things. So if you're looking for some support with that, go ahead and check out my clinic website, which I'll link below. And also I have a blog where I talk about herbalism, trying to revive that as well. So if you're interested, check them out. All right, let's get into the story. My last video, I was talking about the runway that led up to the 2018 complete and utter breakdown of my health. I didn't get into the period of time where I was bedridden for 4 months. I did everything up until then. And at the time I was recording my story and writing it down, which was 2022-ish, it was still really challenging for me to think about that part of my Lyme story because it was very painful to revisit, to relive, and I wasn't out of the woods yet with my own health and healing. So in 2022, my health was like 2 out of 10. I consider, 1 out of 10 to be pretty much bedridden or like very limited in your functionality. So I was just a little bit above that at a 2 out of 10. I wasn't constantly bedridden and in this enormous amount of pain, but I was in a ton of pain, and I was still taking probably 3 to 4 naps a day. I had terrible POTS. I had so many symptoms. In 2022, I started to address the co-infections, which I didn't really do right away when I did a modified Buhner protocol. First, I focused on Lyme, and I did that for a good 2 years. And at that point, I realized I need to address the co-infections. And so I started that, and that was quite challenging for me. So that was the situation that I was telling my Lyme story from, a point of just bringing my head out of the hell that is Lyme disease. I wasn't out of hell. I was working my way out of it. It was still very raw, and I know this word gets overused, but it's true that it was very traumatic for me to think about. So that was the reason why I stopped telling my Lyme story, is that I just couldn't wrap my head around how to tell the time where I was bedridden and in just a ridiculous amount of pain and sickness because of Lyme disease in 2018. So I just kind of stopped. Here it is, 2026, sorry. And it is still challenging for me to think about the time that I was bedridden in 2018 because it is such a chaotic time. I had so many symptoms, so many weird things were going on, and it was like I was in some sort of whirlwind tornado blender, like carnival ride from hell. I was just all over the place with the variety of symptoms and feelings that I was having, and it was so jumbled. That is why now it's hard for me to talk about that time. It's so unclear and just crazy, the story that happened. So here I am, not really able to tell you, you know, kind of in a logical, chronological order with clear symptoms listed out and its duration and everything. I still can't really do that because it was just such a chaotic time in my life. So I hope that someday I can look back on my journals and my notes and get a better picture. I think I need to go diving for clues. I need to be more like an investigator to figure out how I can make sense of that bedridden experience. But I'll do my best to sum it up right now. Basically, I had these triple body migraines, probably 2 to 3 a week. They did get less and less, but I had these migraines over a period of 4 months. And with the migraines, there was just a ton of vomiting and stomach pain. So I would have the migraine for like triple body migraines for 12 to 18 to 24 hours. And then it would take me pretty much that long to recover. And so if I was having 3 of them a week, there was hardly any time in between where I felt functional and normal. Now, there were times where I was on my feet and doing things. And a big part of that was because I had young children. My oldest was 3 and my youngest just turned 1. In fact, the very first triple body migraine that I had was 2 days after she turned 1. That one was pretty similar to most of the other migraines, especially in the first half of the experience. So I had a migraine in my head, and then I had a migraine in 2 other parts of my body, and it was kind of connected to the nerves in the spine or in relation to the spine. So the first one was in my head, second migraine in the left brachial plexus, and the third migraine in my lower left abdomen. Yeah, and then I think, you know, after that, I remember one migraine I had experienced. I had a migraine in my head, and then I had a migraine in my kind of mid-lower thoracic spine, just around maybe about 4 vertebrae, on the vertebrae itself, and then over to the sides. But it did kind of flare out through the lower ribs. But it was definitely centralized on the spine. And then I had a third migraine in my sacrum. So that was kind of the pattern. And until that happened, I don't think I ever had a migraine in my life. I had headaches very rarely. Maybe like, I don't even know, maybe once every 1 or 2 years I would have a headache. Nothing terrible. I mean, there were periods where I did have, like, I was sick in bed with a headache. But yeah, just maybe once every 3 to 4 years did I have a headache that bad. So it's hard for me. Maybe I had one migraine before. I would have to go through and look at my notes, but it definitely wasn't a pattern that I had. I wasn't prone to that. So to have that come out all of a sudden and have 3 of them happening at once, when my health had been so degraded for so long, which I talked about in the videos, you know, before this video of my Lyme story, just all the times that I was kind of worn to a frazzle and just completely exhausted and just very sick and in pain and had chronic fatigue since I was 12 and all this stuff. Yeah, I think that it just kind of came to this point of critical mass, and I had some major neurological inflammation because of it. Now, I did not go to the doctor during that time, and I wish that I would have, and I would 100% counsel anybody else in a similar situation to actually go to the doctor. I understand why I didn't go, but now looking back, I would have done things a little bit differently, and I would have insisted on having some imaging done of my brain and my spine, just my nervous system. And I wouldn't have gone at it by going to like my doctor and being like, I think my Lyme disease is flaring. Well, I didn't even actually think that at the time, so I wouldn't have said that. Yeah, I think that I would use more kind of neutral language and just be more demanding and be like, I need to have this. It would just be really nice to know what was happening. I think it was some sort of like meningitis of the dura mater or something, I don't know, but it was bad, it was terrible. What I did do was I got Chinese herbs from one of my instructors who had a private practice. Somebody I went to school with, somebody I worked at the herbal medicinary with at the graduate school that I got Chinese medicine training. Somebody I really trusted. So I saw him, and slowly through the use of, you know, herbs that he specifically prescribed for me, I saw the migraines reduce in size, duration, frequency, until by the end of December 2018, I thought I was gonna get a migraine, and I didn't. I had a headache. And then there was another time, like the next day, where I was like, I'm gonna get a headache, and I didn't even get the headache. It just kind of came and went down. So I was really lucky that I was in a period of my health where, even though I was really bad off, the migraines hadn't become too kind of wired into my nervous system, because sometimes migraines, or just any sort of pain thing, I don't know, inflammation, it can become a habit and get out of control. And it's not that, you know, you're doomed if that happens. It's just, particularly with migraines, it can be really hard to interrupt that cycle when it happens. So I know that not everybody has access to a high quality Chinese medicine herbal practitioner that you have a relationship with and who can, you know, you trust and whatever. That was just a tool that I happened to have, and it really did help me. Now, how it helped was I went from having 3 migraines a week to 2 migraines a week, triple body. And then let's say the next week I had 2 triple body migraines one time and 2 double body migraines the second time. And the next week I had 2 double body migraines. And then the following week I had 1 triple body or double body migraine, and then the next migraine was only in my head. And then the next week I had just 2 migraines on my head. And then the next week I had 1 migraine in my head. And then it became a headache, and then it became, oh, I'm gonna get a headache, and it didn't. So it was like, if this is the ball of my migraines, if I could put it into a shape, just slowly over time, it just got a little bit smaller. And yeah, it went away. Now, it is 2026, and I still have this kind of pain pattern that comes up in my spine. It's happened a few times. I have a new doctor, and she said that if it happens really bad, I should go to urgent care and ask for imaging of some sort. But don't say that I have Lyme disease or I'm chronically ill. Just say like, something might be bad. What if I have an infection in my dural tube? What if my discs are degenerating or something? Like, kind of play it up, and hopefully they'll see you as this happening as a random thing, not just something that's been happening to you since you've been 12 years old, and just be like, yeah, you're chronically ill, whatever. I haven't done that yet. I kind of want to, but I haven't. But I do dream of getting some sort of imaging, maybe someday. So yes, I still get some patterns in my spine and in various brachial plexus in my body on occasion when I'm having a flare, but I don't really get them in my head. I have gotten maybe 1 or 2 migraines, but One of them was from heat stroke, so I don't really count that. And the other one, I can't really remember what that was like. So even though it sucks to have a migraine or just even a really bad headache, it's not a pattern that I endure. Definitely not like it was back then, where practically every other day I was super sick and vomiting like mad. So during that time of being bedridden in 2018, when this was going on, I also had incredible body pain all over my body. I had extreme tailbone pain. And I think I talked about this in the video prior to this. I had extreme TMJ. I had extreme like cervical spine pain. I had very high shoulder pain, chest pain, muscle pain in the upper traps, or like the what do they call it, coat hanger, low back pain, pelvic pain, foot pain, leg pain associated with bartonella. It was nuts how much pain I had. It was also, oh no, never mind. So I had that, and my energy level was probably a 0.5 out of 10. I was just so depleted and degraded. I could hardly breathe. It was terrible. Yeah, so that was my life for those 4 months. And after that resolved, it was right around New Year's 2019, because I thought there was a week, and I was like, oh, I should be having a migraine or a headache this week, and I didn't even have a hint of one. So I was like, whoa. And then right after that, I was able to kind of take some time to myself. Like literally, I told my husband, like, you need to put the kids to bed. I'm gonna go upstairs and look at this Lyme disease book that I have, that I got as a herbal student, as an, you know, I never in a million years thought that's what I had, which is very ironic, because obviously I did, even though I was tested and it said it was positive, and I had Lyme as a child and all this stuff. So I consulted that, and then I listened to some lectures that a Lyme literate acupuncturist and naturopath that I worked with at my school. Well, I worked at her clinic first as an observer, and then I did 2 internships at her clinic, and she specialized in hard to treat Lyme disease. Hello, that was obviously me. In fact, that's what led me to get tested in 2013-ish, was working with her. So she gave me and another student a miniature lecture, like kind of masterclass, you could say, on Lyme disease and what she did to work with it. And I recorded it on my phone in a voice memo, and I also had, she wrote some notes down in my clinic notebook. So I found those, and I listened to them, and I read through Buhner's book, and I made myself a little protocol, basically, you know, the modified Buhner's plus some other things. And I opened up my computer, and, you know, I'm so blessed to be a licensed acupuncturist practitioner, because I can order many products at wholesale, which is half off. But yet I had this incredible, like this huge mound of guilt at spending the money to buy those products and those herbs and those tinctures and whatever. It just, I felt so bad. I mean, at that time we were really struggling financially. Obviously I wasn't working, I was so sick. I still had a really high student loan I had to pay, and still do to this month. Years later, I have this very expensive loan, so I have a lot of guilt about that, and I definitely did then. And I think we were in debt even at that time. Like, things were hard. But I realized that I had to do this. Like, I just had to face it and accept the fact that this was going on with me, and take some steps towards starting a protocol. Like, I had to try something. I'd already done antibiotics growing up, and 35 times. Now, not all of them were for Lyme, let's be clear. Very few of them were actually for Lyme. But the last 2 antibiotics that I was on, was a year and a half of tetracycline and a year and a half of doxycycline for something else. And those did not go well. So I already knew that I kind of had given it a try. So it seemed like this was the next bit of hope that I could explore. So I was feeling like, okay, I have to do this. I have to take action. I'm going to do this. And on the other hand, it was like, oh my God, I'm going to spend $200 on supplements and herbs. And I feel so guilty about it. Do you know that would be $400 if I wasn't a practitioner? So I was really lucky, again, to have that opportunity to like get things half off, but still it was so hard to come to terms with the fact that I was, and I had been since 1994, chronically ill. And that whole time I had been needing a lot more support than I had ever got. And I was just going to have to invest in myself. It felt like this internal battle of like, you know, Celia versus her shame of needing help and the cost that it takes. But I wish I could say it resolved. It didn't. That feeling of shame and guilt of having to spend money and like take time to myself and all of this stuff, it didn't really. I just had to do it anyways. So I ordered the things and I slowly started a protocol. First I did some recommendations from Dr. Satya Ambrose, the Lyme literate naturopath and acupuncturist that I worked with at her clinic that treated hard to treat Lyme disease. So her recommendation was like, first you need to get the gut supported a little bit. Like if there's anything wrong with the gut, you know, do some whatever, it's going to be individual for that person. And so I did a few things there. And she said, you need to look at just a few nutrients. You have to have some zinc going on. If somebody's iron deficient, you have to have some iron that they can tolerate, and some vitamin D, especially if somebody's low. Like figure out what your vitamin D is, get it tested, and address it. So I first started with this little kind of protocol of, you know, like a probiotic, vitamin D, fish oil, iron, zinc, just kind of basic things. That was it. So I started there, and within a month I had a major healing reaction flare. And I think it was just showing me how depleted my immune system and my energy and my entire vitality was, and that with a little bit of support, my vitality was like, okay, you have something going on here. You have damage, you have inflammation, we need to resolve it. And through that process, I had a flare. So that was kind of a sign that things were working. So I kind of, you know, worked through that beginning intro period for another couple months, felt like I stabilized a little bit, and then I added the protocol. And that took a lot of tweaking, and 2019, I would say that my health was 1 out of 10, maybe 0.5 out of 10. 2019 was so freaking hard. I developed absolutely debilitating POTS. It was terrible. It ruined my life. Sometimes we can talk about it. It was bad. I was so fatigued and I was in so much pain. And I had intense brain inflammation. I called it brain fog at the time, but that's not quite the right word. Brain inflammation to me is when you feel like you were bumped, like smacked in the head with a metal rod, and you have just aching, raw, it feels like an open wound combined with a deep bruise ache. It felt like I had been damaged in my head. When I was younger and having a major Lyme flare after I was on the antibiotics when I was 19, when I was 20, I had the same feeling, and that time felt like a brick was wedged in my head, and it was very painful and just terrible. Another time where I was in a bad spot, it felt like my head was in a bucket of concrete, just a 5-gallon bucket, and it was like tight and painful and bruised and bloody, and yeah. So I had the brain inflammation, and it was really, really, really bad. I had probably more symptoms too. Oh yeah, I had nerve issues with my head. So I had my sense of taste got messed up. Everything I tasted rotten, and in particular it tasted like rotten vegan cheese. Don't ask me why, that's just what it tasted like. I was buying things from the grocery store and returning them, being like, oh my gosh, this oat milk tastes, it's rotten. I would go back and return it. I would open up a thing of applesauce in a glass jar and be like, oh, this applesauce is nasty, it's taste it's bad. And my husband would be like, it tastes fine to me. I'm like, you can't taste that? It's disgusting. And so I kept returning food, and it came to my realization that it was me. And the reason it did is because I was eating like blueberries off the plant in the garden, and it tasted the same. I was like, everything I taste has this taste. The only things I didn't have the taste were water, herbal teas, things that were like really oniony or garlicky. I think that taste just kind of overrode the taste. Even coffee tasted bad. So that went on for quite some time. Interestingly, this was a year before COVID, so I can't blame it on that. I also had a palsy, is that what it's called? Where like you get droopy on one side of my face, and I had neuralgias on that side. It was terrible. I hated that year. That year was awful. 2020, my energy was a tiny bit better. I would say I was maybe a 1 out of 10, but slight, like 1.5 maybe, I don't know. It was bad. 2020 is when I developed more nerve pain, which is not fun. I still, in 2019, 2020, I was still doing Buhner, kind of treating Lyme, you know, specifically with his protocols, and modified. And I just felt so bad. I don't know how to say it. I wanted to be bedridden. Everything I did was awful. Yeah, it was really, really hard. Okay, 2021, maybe I was getting to be like a solid 1.5 out of 10 in my energy. 2022, I was about a 2 on my health and vitality. That's when I started to address my main co-infections, doing a modified Buhner approach, which was working with bartonella and Mycoplasma. And that was its own type of hell. So having Lyme disease, I went into like the Lyme disease underworld and had to climb my way out of it. And halfway through climbing it, I was then had to face bartonella and Mycoplasma also in hell. It's the best way. I think that depending on the person and the situation, that co-infections could be just as bad, if not worse. Yeah, I won't go into it. It will take too long. But some of the main symptoms I had were just a lot of nerve pain and nerve issues coming out from the spine to the peripheral area, as well as cranial nerves. So yeah, a lot of pain and neuropathy and weirdness like that. And then incredible shortness of breath, air hunger, and just not feeling like I could breathe hardly at all. So I had to lay down every day, probably 3 or 4 times, and just coach myself through, like, you can breathe. It's okay. You can get air, because I was so air hungry that yeah, it just, I couldn't really function. It was terrible. And I found some tricks to help me with dyspnea, air hunger, or shortness of breath, based on what Buhner had suggested. So those things help, and they still do to this day when I get air hunger. It's so funny. In 2022, I thought that I was healthy enough to go back to work. Meanwhile, I could, I was still taking like 3 naps a day, having to lay down and coach myself how to breathe. I had a ton of nerve pain, and my energy level was literally 2 out of 10. But having been bedridden and then having my health be like a 1 out of 10 for so long, I had felt like my energy, my health, my vitality had doubled. Like, oh, I can, stay up for like an hour now. I must be getting so much better. It was just, yeah, it was crazy. 2023, I would say my health continued to get somewhat better. Overall, my vitality was a 3 out of 10. And 2024, my health was a 4 out of 10. Same with 2025, my health continued to get better. I would say 5 out of 10. And it's 2026, I would say my health is like a 5 out of 10, but right now I'm going through some struggles with perimenopause, and I have a lot of pain, and I have a lot of nerve issues. So it's, yeah, I was kind of heading to be 6 out of 10 in my health, but I think that the perimenopause symptoms have presented a new challenge. My energy level, though, is, it varies, but I would say it's between a 4 and a 7. 10 out of 10 is the best, 1 out of 10 is you're in bed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is like on the not enough side. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is you have more than enough energy. People sometimes think 5 is in the middle of a 1 to 10 scale. It's not. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is over here, and it's cut by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Even 5.5 is on the not enough side. Okay, I just get a little nitpicky about that. Not nitpicky, but I want to be specific because it can be useful to kind of understand where your scales are to assess things properly. So that's my reference point. Yeah, I still do a modified Buhner type protocol, and I find it to be very, very useful to me. And I wasn't really going to go into details because I don't know, I haven't really talked about herbs or things on this channel quite yet. But I think more so even for myself to kind of document where I am right now, I take andrographis and turmeric. I take those once a day. I take a herbal kind of pain support, inflammation support formula called Willow Relief. I take that once a day. I take tinctures 2 to 3 times a day. I take cat's claw, Chinese, cat's claw, South American, Scutellaria bicalensis. Sorry, Minnicity. I take Bittins, and then I rotate out some other herbs based on how I'm feeling during that. Right now I'm taking a lot of ginseng because I need the support for my chi, my energy. Yeah, I kind of had a hard winter, and it's April right now. So that's what I take. Okay, I take Japanese knotweed, which is kind of resveratrol, and pomegranate. I take that in a little mixture every day. That is very helpful for brain inflammation for me. I don't take that every day. I want to, but it takes a little bit of time for me to like stir it because it's herbal powders. So it's sometimes it takes more effort, and I don't always fit it in. And then I take astragalus tea blend that I cook on the stove, and I pour off some of that tea into a cup of mushroom powders and adaptogenic herb powders. And I really am not trying to be instructional, okay? So don't run out and buy anything that I said. This is not for everybody. I mean, Buhner's protocol is intended to be taken with antibiotics. It's safe to do, but I don't want to like be super scary about it. It's just, it can be overwhelming. So this is more for my own grounding myself in like what my herbal routines are at this time. So the powders that I like are cordyceps mushroom, turkey tail mushroom, lion's mane mushroom, ashwagandha powder, and eleuthero powder, and also turmeric. So I take that in, I put those powders in a cup, and then I pour the astragalus tea over that. And there are some other things that I take. I really should be doing better at taking iron because I still have iron issues. I take vitamin D once a week. I have this bigger dose on hand, so I just do that once. When that runs out, maybe I'll get a smaller dose and take that more frequently, more often. Sometimes I take B vitamins. I'm still a little on the fence as to what sort of B vitamins are best for me because of methylation defects that may or may not be there, and I've never officially been tested. So, but both of my kids had, one of my kids had a tongue tie and one of them had a lip tie, so obviously it runs in the family. I'm not sure. But yeah, I should maybe do that more, the B vitamins, because I do have energy and nerve issues. Trying to think what else I do. My health right now, what I'm really struggling with is musculoskeletal pain in the spine and nerve damage from various things. So even before I had Lyme disease at age 8, which I actually didn't have Lyme disease, I just had a bullseye rash and was treated, and I was fine until I was 12. And I got bartonella, and getting the bartonella in the system, I do believe, triggered the Lyme to kind of come out. So I didn't have symptoms with my health until I was 12. And my first symptom was chronic fatigue and cytokine-induced insomnia. And then when I was 14, I started to get body pain, joint pain, basically juvenile arthritis, starting at age 14. At 16, I started to get issues with my health, so I was constantly having colds, flus, bronchitis, pneumonias. I was hospitalized for pneumonia. I was just constantly sick, sore throats. I had had sore throats before that. That was kind of a problem of mine, starting in like middle school, kind of a constant strep throat or something. And so that just continued. And then when I was 18, I was hospitalized for pneumonia the second time, and they said, you know what, we're pretty sure you have antibiotic resistant Mycoplasma pneumoniae. So we're not going to give you a 5th Z-pack. How about you just go home and do bed rest to start with 3 days. You know, hydrate yourself, take some baths, lay in bed, get a lot of sleep, don't eat sugar. Isn't that amazing that somebody told me that in the year 2000 in Wisconsin? Lay off the sugar, because it is a really big trigger for me, especially with my throat sickness. And you know what? Lo and behold, I did overcome that bout of pneumonia. So anyways, that's kind of my health according to like what happened with the chronic infections. But before that, as a young kid, I had hypermobility. So I would continuously sublux or dislocate my shoulders, but in particular, this right one. And it would come out so many times that, and my family would bring me into the ER. They would put the shoulder back in. And after it happened, you know what, 4 times or something, the people in the ER were like, you know what, we're gonna show you how to put it back in, because this is probably just gonna keep happening. And so then I had family members putting back in my shoulder, which probably wasn't the best. Whatever the case is, I have some damage in this nerve plexus from that, I'm pretty sure. And then it goes down my hand, and I have just nerve pain here. And then I also had damage to my mid-back when I fell out of a treehouse when I was in 4th grade, 9 years old, and I have chronic pain there. So I think that those are exacerbated by the cytokine situation with having these chronic infections. So I have a lot of inflammation, and I am hypermobile, and I'm in perimenopause, and I have underlying damage. So all of that kind of creates this pain situation. But here I am at my acupuncture office, and you can see there, That's my heat lamp, and I have a heated table, and believe it or not, it does help when I sit down with my table. That's why I came here today. I actually don't have a patient, thus wearing the sweatshirt. Not that I have to get dressed up, but I'm very casual, let's just say. So yeah, I'm constantly kind of dealing with pain right now. Physical therapy has helped a lot, but acupuncture has helped. I go to see somebody else who takes my insurance, which is nice. You know, stretching, working out, walking, taking baths, herbal, like oil massage. I use St. John's wort oil where I can, and then put like a liniment, an herbal liniment on top. Those things help, but you know, it still flares quite a bit. So that's what I'm mainly struggling with my health. And the pain kind of like messes up my sleep, and so then my energy level goes down. So that's where I am, I would say. And I do believe that I still have, and maybe always will, have kind of post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. I know I haven't been formally diagnosed with the ICD-10 code, but from what I've learned over the past 6-7 years of reading about Lyme disease and doing a lot of research with Lyme disease and working with Lyme disease and other people, and I'm just constantly learning about this, I do believe that it makes damage, and the damage itself is kind of the pathogenic factor, you could say. So you don't have to be full of a ton of bacteria that are actively infecting new sites constantly in order to be very unwell with Lyme disease. I mean, that's kind of the premise of long COVID. And I know that COVID is a virus and Lyme disease and the co-infections are bacteria, so it's kind of different, but I think people understand. It's like, for long COVID, it's not that you are continually sick with COVID, you know, you have a runny nose or you have a fever or you have this. It's that you had COVID, and since then something was altered, something was damaged, something was, you know, why do I want to say wronged in the body? Something happened, it altered your body, your health, your well-being, your nervous system, and since then you haven't been the same, and there's a constellation of symptoms that come along with that. And this isn't just my opinion, but you know, I feel like I have that, or I have experience of that. And the reason I say it's not my opinion is because it is one of the only kind of chronic Lyme disease diagnoses that you can have. Sometimes, even here on YouTube, somebody in the comment section of some video will be like, there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. And it's like, okay, fine. It's called post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. But it's the same freaking thing, okay? You don't need to mince words. And it definitely is real. So taking a modified Buhner kind of continually, I do lower doses and lower frequency, but it really does help me. I don't know what things will happen in the future for me, but I hope to get, you know, grip on my pain situation. And there's a lot I could do. There's so much I could do. Yeah, so this is kind of the synopsis of my physical experience, and there's more going on kind of mentally, socially, emotionally, even spiritually or energetically, like what it meant to be so sick and how that changed my sense of who I am and my whole biography. Because I did not really realize that I had been chronically ill my entire life, well, since age 12, until I was 36. I don't know how old I was when I finally figured it out, but I lived for a very long time thinking that the reason I felt so bad was because of me, that I wasn't taking good care enough of myself, that I didn't have it together enough, that I wasn't mature enough to make myself sleep properly, that I was sabotaging myself, that it must be just some personal flaw, that I didn't know how to sleep well, and therefore that messed up my energy, my health, my pain, my sickness, everything. Now, it is true that I had bad sleeping habits. It is true that my inability to sleep really messed up my health, so I wasn't completely off base. But the reason that I had that was right after I got bartonella and I was untreated. I had cytokine-induced insomnia, and that just continued until I found Buhner's protocol and started to take tryptophan. Sorry, that was one very important thing that I forgot to mention that I took. Tryptophan, and I do micro doses of melatonin. Basically, I do, I don't know, maybe 0.5 milligrams at a time of a lozenge. I found that works for me. So yes, tryptophan, how could I forget? It was a big part of my protocol, and I still use it to this day, which is important because Lyme disease can deplete up to 80% of the tryptophan in your hypothalamus, which is unbelievable. So that's important. Someday I'll go over more kind of health, research, herbal type stuff. But for now, I just wanted to talk about kind of the physical reality from where I left off into my Lyme story until now. And hopefully I'll be able to move on with some more relevant content now that it's like all of me is caught up. So I hope you are doing well. Thanks for all the comments. I have not responded to them all, but I've read them, and I'm so glad that we are not completely suffering alone. Sorry to laugh, but you know, it can feel that way. So wherever you are, I hope you're doing well. Take care, and I'll see you again later. Bye.